I sat there smiling, pretending the plastic back scratcher and expired mints were thoughtful gifts, while laughter danced across my son's marble kitchen like I was the punchline. The pink foil shimmered under the chandelier, but it might as well have been wrapping paper on a warning sign. "It's just a gag, Mom," they chuckled, as if mocking me was a tradition. 40 years I spent building credit, co-signing their dreams, and now I was just someone to laugh at over lasagna. They thought I'd go home hurt. Instead, I went home and opened the foreclosure folder. "Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe." Gloria Price sat at the end of her son's dining table, fork poised in midair, as Darren slid a pink foiled box across the wood toward her. The paper shimmered under the chandelier, ribbon curling like something chosen with care. But she already knew better. Amber leaned forward, eyes sparkling. "Go on, open it. We thought this one would really get you." The laughter curling in Amber's throat was enough to tell Gloria the punchline had already been rehearsed. She peeled back the foil slowly, not because she wanted to savor the moment, but because her hand needed to be steady. Inside lay a wicker basket stuffed with tissue paper, a plastic back scratcher, nail clippers and flimsy cardboard, a child's puzzle with loose pieces rattling in the box, a bag of mints expired last year, 2 waxy candles that gave off a sickly chemical scent. Amber giggled, covering her mouth like a teenager. "It's a gag gift, you know, because you're always so practical." Darren laughed harder, smacking the table with his palm. "Yeah, Mom, lighten up, it's funny." Gloria set each item back into the basket with deliberate care, her expression calm, her heartbeat a slow drum. "Thank you," she said simply. That was it. Amber's grin faltered, the silence flattening the air between them. Darren shrugged, already turning his attention toward the football game flickering in the next room. Gloria folded the glitter paper neatly, set it aside, and allowed dinner to resume. The lasagna was lukewarm, oversalted, but she ate it without complaint. Darren launched into a monologue about his BMW lease, bragging as though the table were full of admirers. Amber scrolled on her phone between bites, flashing photos from Miami to whoever would look. Only Becca, their 14-year-old daughter, seemed to notice the weight in her grandmother's silence. The girl's fork dragged idle circles through sauce, her eyes darting up with small private sympathy. Gloria met her gaze for a moment, then returned to her plate. When the cake came out, a lopsided grocery store sheet with hard pink roses, Amber sang "Happy Birthday" in an exaggerated theatrical voice. Darren joined in half-heartedly, grinning when Gloria blew out the candles in one measured breath. He cut himself the largest slice before passing plates around. The evening wound down quickly. Darren stretched on the couch. Amber feigned a yawn. "Well, that was fun. Glad you liked your gift, Gloria." Gloria lifted her purse from the chair, the basket of trinkets dangling like a cheap afterthought. "Yes," she said, her voice even. "It was memorable." No one followed her to the door. Outside, Tampa's humid night pressed against her skin, thick with the scent of wet grass and lake water. The street lights buzzed faintly, the only sound her shoes crunching against gravel as she crossed to her car. At home, silence wrapped around her. She placed the basket on the counter, its glittery ribbon catching the dull light, mocking. She opened her refrigerator, pulled out the small vanilla cake she'd baked the day before, and sliced herself a piece. Buttercream, soft sponge, sweet and steady. It tasted of care, of something real, unlike the hollow performance she had just endured. She carried the last bite into her study. The clock ticked, steady and sharp, each second cutting deeper than candles and laughter could mask. Sliding open the bottom drawer of her filing cabinet, she drew out a thick folder labeled in her precise handwriting, "Price, Darren, Mortgage." The papers were crisp, the ink sharp, every line of obligation preserved in black and white. She pressed her palm against the top sheet the way some people might test the strength of glass. Darren thought the night's insult had ended at the dinner table, but Gloria knew better. This was where it would begin. The folder lay open across Gloria's desk, the pages fanned like cards in a stacked deck. Each line of ink, each column of figures, brought back the years she'd carried the weight of her son's house on her shoulders. Darren had begged her to co-sign when he and Amber wanted the 4-bedroom on Cypress Landing. "It's an investment, Mom," he'd said, grinning like the world was waiting to crown him. Against her better judgment, she'd agreed, securing the loan with her own spotless record. Now the papers told a different story. Missed payments, extension notices, late fees. She traced her finger down the ledger where she had stepped in, quietly wiring money to the lender, covering his slip-ups so his wife wouldn't see the cracks. Twice, maybe 3 times. She'd never told a soul. Darren thought she'd moved on, too tired to keep track. But Gloria was a woman who had spent 40 years underwriting mortgages. Numbers were her language, and she never stopped reading them. She picked up her phone, dialing a number she hadn't used in months. "Howard Lake," a steady voice answered. "Howard, it's Gloria." A pause, then warmth. "Gloria Price. Been a while. What can I do for you?" Her eyes lingered on Darren's shaky signature. The ink pressed too hard into the page. "I want clarity. On Darren's mortgage. I'm still the lien holder." "Yes, yes you are," Howard confirmed. "And from what I'm seeing here, he's not just late, he's in default. Gloria, you can pull the trigger at any time." His matter-of-fact tone slid across the line, crisp as cut glass. She leaned back in her chair, the Florida night pressing damp against her study window. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, softly but firm, "Not yet. I want them to feel safe first." Howard chuckled under his breath, not mocking, but acknowledging her resolve. "Then keep watching. When you're ready, we'll move." After hanging up, Gloria sat still, the tick of the clock loud against the quiet. A breeze pushed faintly through the window screen, carrying the lake's earthy smell. The file remained spread before her, a silent reminder that power didn't always roar. It could wait, patient as a stone, until the right moment. Her computer pinged with a new notification. Reluctantly, she turned to the glow of the screen. Amber's face filled the feed, smiling wide, camera angled high. "Look what Darren and I got Gloria for her birthday," she chirped, the video captioned with bold letters, "cheap and funny." Laughter spilled from the background, Darren's voice egging her on. The camera panned across the basket of junk like it was some comic masterpiece. Comment after comment rolled in, laughing emojis, snide remarks, a few relatives chiming in with LOL. Gloria's throat tightened. She closed the window, the brightness of the screen still burning in her vision even after she shut it down. That basket sat on her counter, its foil still intact, as though mocking her from the next room. She rose, poured herself a glass of water, and stared out at the moonlit ripple across the lake. They thought her silence meant surrender. They didn't know silence could also mean planning. Another ping broke the quiet. This time it wasn't Amber. A different notification scrolled across the top of her phone, an alert from the county records office. Gloria frowned and opened it. Her breath caught as the document loaded. Darren had filed paperwork. Another loan, pulled against the property. A second mortgage. A home equity line of credit. Secured without her consent, without her knowledge. The numbers glared back at her in black and white. Her son hadn't just stumbled. He had gambled her name. Gloria's eyes flicked across the scanned county record, her pulse quickening with each line. Darren's name. Amber's name. And then hers. Without her consent, without even a conversation, her credit had been tethered to a home equity line of credit. The document shimmered on the screen like a betrayal signed in ink. She clicked through the itemized summary, her stomach turning. $20,000, withdrawn within weeks of approval. Bank transfers labeled for remodeling. A contractor listed for granite countertops and a custom wet bar. And then the kicker, a down payment for Darren's precious BMW lease. Her name, her reputation, underwriting their vanity. The cursor hovered as she leaned closer, glasses sliding down the bridge of her nose. The memory of Darren's grin at dinner, the smug lean back in his chair, the bragging about the car, rose sharp and fresh. She had smiled politely, even then, and now she knew the source of his confidence. He'd stolen it from her. Her hands tightened around the phone as she dialed Howard. He picked up on the second ring. "You sound urgent," he said. "Because it is," Gloria replied. Darren pulled a HELOC against the house. "My name is on it." A pause, the faint rustle of papers on his end. "Without your authorization? Without so much as a phone call?" She steadied her voice, though the fury beneath was hot enough to tremble. "The money went to a car and countertops. Nothing that qualifies as necessity." Howard's tone cooled, deliberate. "That qualifies as fraudulent representation, Gloria. I can start pulling every supporting document. Once it's in order, foreclosure is not just an option, it's inevitable." Gloria's gaze drifted to the dark window, her reflection faint against the night. "Do it." Quietly, she ended the call and sat back in her chair. The house creaked around her in the stillness, a reminder that she was alone but not powerless. Numbers never lied, and the numbers were screaming. Her phone buzzed, cutting through the silence. A text message. "Becca, I wish I could stay with you instead." The words pressed like a weight against Gloria's chest. 14 years old, caught between parents who lived for appearances and a grandmother who lived for truth. Gloria's thumb hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't send a reply. Not yet. Words wouldn't protect Becca. Actions would. Instead, Gloria opened her laptop again, but not to the mortgage files. This time she logged into her bank. Methodically, she created a new savings account. Title: Rebecca Price, Education Fund. She transferred in a modest sum, enough to start. Enough to promise herself that if Darren and Amber dragged their daughter into chaos, Becca would still have a future tethered to something stable. The act steadied her breathing. She shut the laptop, finished her water, and moved toward the living room. The basket from Amber still sat on the counter, gaudy and shallow. She brushed past it without a glance. Just as she reached for the light switch, her phone rang again. This time not a text. The name flashing across the screen stopped her in place. Maya Lynn, HOA board member. Fair, sharp-eyed, Gloria answered, her voice careful. "Maya, Gloria. Sorry to bother you this late." The woman's tone was brisk, businesslike, but edged with concern. "You're listed as a contact on Darren and Amber's property. I need to let you know. Amber hasn't paid HOA dues in 7 months. They're about $2,400 behind. The account is now lien eligible." The words struck clean and cold, confirming what Gloria already sensed. Darren and Amber weren't just careless, they were drowning, and they dragged her name into the tide. Gloria stood in the darkened living room, her phone glowing pale in her hand, the silence of the house pressing heavy around her. Outside, the lake was still black glass under the moonlight. And now, the cracks in Darren's life weren't just hidden in paperwork, they were visible to the entire neighborhood. The HOA meeting hall smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee, its folding chairs lined in neat rows under the hum of fluorescent lights. Gloria sat near the back, pen poised over her small notebook, her expression calm but unreadable. She wasn't here to speak, she was here to listen. At the front, Maya Lynn adjusted her glasses and tapped a folder against the podium. Her voice was steady, crisp enough to cut through the room's idle murmurs. "The Price residence is currently in arrears, 7 consecutive months without paying dues. That totals $2,400. A stir rippled through the small audience. Homeowners whispered, heads leaning close. Gloria's pen scratched steadily across the page. $2,400 delinquent. 7 months. Darren and Amber. Maya continued. "This makes the property eligible for lien action. If no resolution is reached within 30 days, we'll proceed accordingly." Gloria didn't move. She simply underlined the word lien. Around her, neighbors exchanged raised brows and quiet sighs. Everyone knew who Darren and Amber were, but no one said their names aloud. After the meeting adjourned, Maya caught Gloria's eye. For a split second, there was the faintest flicker of understanding there, as if Maya sensed Gloria's silence meant more than disinterest. but neither woman said a word. Gloria simply closed her notebook, slipped it into her purse, and left with the same unhurried pace she had arrived with. Back home, the glow of her laptop screen lit the kitchen. A new set of Darren's vacation photos scrolled across social media. Amber in oversized sunglasses on a Miami rooftop bar, Darren grinning in front of a rented jet ski, champagne glasses, ocean views, hashtags about living the dream. Gloria's lips pressed into a thin line. Her mouse clicked deliberately, capturing screenshots one after another, saving them into a folder she'd labeled in cold precision, price evidence. Each image was another stone for the foundation she was quietly building. The next morning, the Florida sun burned through her blinds as she watered her potted ferns. The phone rang, but she didn't pick it up. Darren again. He'd leave a message about how things were fine, or maybe ask for a short-term loan. She let the answering machine catch his voice, then deleted it before he'd even finished. The knock on the door that afternoon was unexpected. Gloria opened it to find Becca standing there, backpack slung low, her shoulders sagging as if the straps were made of stone. "Grandma, can I come in?" Her voice was soft, tentative. "Of course." Gloria stepped aside, letting the girl pass into the cool of the house. She set a glass of iced tea on the counter, watching Becca sink into the couch like she hadn't slept. The girl picked at the zipper of her hoodie, silent for a long time. Finally her words came in a whisper. "They keep fighting. Mom says we don't have money for school stuff, but Dad keeps buying new clothes and shoes." Gloria lowered herself into the armchair across from her, folding her hands neatly. She didn't interrupt, just let the silence make space for the words. Becca swallowed hard, glancing toward the window as if afraid someone might hear. Then she leaned forward, voice dropping even lower. "They're hiding letters in the garage." Gloria's pulse quickened, though her face remained calm. She tilted her head slightly, inviting Becca to go on. "They put all the envelopes in boxes. Big stacks. I saw red ones. Some said final notice." The air between them grew heavy, the sound of the clock ticking suddenly sharp and insistent. Gloria reached across the space, resting her hand gently over Becca's trembling fingers. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. Outside, a warm breeze rustled the palm fronds against the house, but inside, Gloria felt the temperature shift. Becca's whispered secret had cracked something open. The debts weren't just numbers anymore. They were spilling out of boxes, waiting to be uncovered. Becca's hands trembled slightly as she worked the side door key into the lock. The garage smelled of old paint and motor oil, the thick Florida heat making the air heavy. She glanced up at her grandmother, nervous but determined. "They're both out," she whispered. "Dad's at work. Mom's shopping. We don't have much time." Gloria stepped inside, her shoes crunching against the concrete floor. The garage was dim, lit only by thin slants of daylight cutting through a dusty window. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the far wall, labeled in Darren's hurried handwriting. Tools, ex-Mayas, storage. But the one nearest the workbench had no label. Becca led her to it. The girl pulled back the lid, and the smell hit first, paper, ink, and the faint metallic tang of envelopes that had been sealed too long. Gloria reached in and pulled out a stack. Final notice. Past due. Termination warning. The envelope screamed in bold red letters, unopened, their corners curling with age. Becca hugged her backpack close to her chest, her eyes wide. "They just throw them in here. Every week. Mom says if they don't open them they don't count." Gloria sifted deeper. Credit card threats, HOA delinquency statements, utility disconnection letters, and then the heavy envelope from the mortgage lender stamped in stark lettering, "Final warning be in, for foreclosure." Her stomach clenched, though her face stayed still. She had suspected chaos. But this was collapse, hidden under cardboard and dust. She pulled out another box, this one heavier. Inside, dozens more letters, unopened, the sheer volume staggering. Red notices, pink slips, Certified mail slips crumpled at the bottom. Gloria's hands moved steadily, but her pulse raced. These aren't mistakes, she murmured, half to herself. They're hiding them, every single one. Becca looked down, her voice barely audible. I don't think Dad even reads them. He just shoves them here. Gloria laid the stack gently on the workbench, the paper fanning out like evidence on a courtroom table. Each envelope felt like a stone added to the weight pressing on her chest, but also strangely like ammunition. She had spent a career in mortgage underwriting, dissecting numbers until the truth was undeniable. Now the truth wasn't in columns, it was in this garage, piled in forgotten boxes. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out, saw Howard's name, and stepped back toward the door for privacy. I found them, she said quietly when he answered. Found what? Boxes, piles of unopened bills, credit cards, utilities, HOA, and she hesitated, her eyes landing on the mortgage envelope. The final foreclosure warning. Howard exhaled sharply through the line. That's it, Gloria. With that stack, you have every legal leg to stand on. You can begin foreclosure proceedings immediately. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, the heat of the garage pressing against her skin. Then she opened them, steady and sharp. Let's start with a gift they won't forget. There was silence on the other end, then Howard's low chuckle, not of amusement, but of recognition. I'll draft the paperwork tonight. Becca had crept closer, watching her grandmother with anxious eyes. Gloria slipped her phone back into her purse and forced a gentle smile for the girl's sake. Don't worry, sweetheart. Some of these letters are going to be answered. They left the garage the way they came, careful to leave everything just as it had been. To Darren and Amber, it would look untouched, another box in the dust. But to Gloria, it was a vault of secrets cracked wide open. The next morning, Darren ambled down his driveway, coffee mug in hand, as the sun rose over the neighborhood. He barely noticed the mail truck rolling past, until the carrier slid a stiff white envelope into his box. Certified, stamped official, the kind of letter that couldn't be ignored. He tugged it free, brow furrowing at the seal. His hands tightened as his eyes caught the word he hadn't expected, the one that carried more weight than any birthday joke or Miami selfie could erase. Default. The world around him stayed bright, birds chattering, sprinklers hissing against manicured lawns. But Darren's jaw slackened, the envelope trembling between his fingers, as though the ground beneath his feet had just shifted. The pounding on her front door rattled the glass pane, each strike louder than the last. Gloria set down her teacup and smoothed the newspaper folded neatly on the table. When she opened the door, Darren shoved past her, his face flushed red, sweat gleaming across his brow, despite the morning chill from the lake breeze. What the hell is this? He barked, waving the thick white envelope like a weapon. His voice was already breaking with rage. Gloria closed the door behind him, her movements unhurried. That, she said evenly, is your reality catching up with you. You think you can just throw me out of my own house? His hands shook, the letter crumpling in his fist. You're out of your mind, Mom. Gloria didn't flinch. She crossed to the dining table, pulled out a leather folder, and slid the mortgage contract across the polished wood. Her name, his name, signature still crisp in blue ink. You signed this, she said, voice calm as a blade. You asked for my help, and you promised to pay. Darren's jaw worked, but no words came. The front door opened again without knocking. Amber swept in, sunglasses perched on her head, perfume trailing behind her. The moment she saw the scene, Darren pacing, Gloria seated, papers spread, she dropped the mask of indifference and slipped on another. Gloria, she cried, pressing a manicured hand to her chest. This has to be a misunderstanding. Darren's been under so much stress. We just needed a little time. Her voice cracked theatrically, eyes glistening. Gloria lifted her gaze, cool and unwavering. You've had time, years of it. I paid your missed payments. I covered your mistakes and you paid me back with lies, and another loan I never agreed to. She slid another sheet forward, the home equity line of credit documents she had printed. Fraudulent representation. That's the official term. Amber faltered, her tears vanishing almost as quickly as they came. You wouldn't do this to your own family, she snapped, her voice sharpening. Gloria leaned back, folding her hands neatly on the table. This isn't revenge. This is responsibility. You made choices. Now you live with them. Silence spread heavy in the room. Darren paced the carpet, his sneakers squeaking against the fibers, muttering curses under his breath. Amber crossed her arms, mask cracking into resentment. In the hallway, unseen until that moment, a soft creak gave them away. Becca, standing in the shadows, clutching the strap of her backpack, her wide eyes fixed on her grandmother, not her parents. She didn't move, didn't interrupt, but every word was etched into her memory. Darren's voice rose again, desperate now. You can't do this. You'll what? Gloria cut in, sharper than she intended. Her voice didn't rise, but the steel inside it froze him mid-sentence. She leaned forward, tapped the stack of papers with a single finger. This isn't me doing something to you. This is you finally meeting the consequences you thought you could ignore. Darren's shoulders slumped, his anger dissolving into silence. For the first time he looked small in her house, like the boy who used to slam doors when told no. Amber muttered something under her breath, grabbed her purse and stormed out, heels clicking angrily against the tile. Darren lingered, staring at the documents as if they were written in another language. Gloria gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder, and stood. You'll receive the next notice, through the proper channels, she said. Her voice was final, the kind of tone that ended conversations for good. Darren shoved the crumpled letter back into his pocket and left without another word. The slam of the door reverberated through the quiet house. Gloria waited until the sound faded down the driveway. Then she walked back to her study, sat at her desk, and opened her laptop. Her fingers moved with precision, selecting the scanned mortgage, attaching Howard's prepared affidavit, filling in the necessary fields. The county clerk's portal glowed pale blue across her screen. One last breath, one final check. Then, with a steady click, Gloria filed the foreclosure motion. The confirmation number flashed back at her. Cold, official, irreversible. The envelope was unmistakable, thick stamped with certified mail, its edges sealed with the kind of authority that couldn't be ignored. Darren pulled it from the mailbox with a frown, already annoyed before he even tore the strip open. Amber leaned over his shoulder, chewing her lip, mascara still smudged from last night. The words inside hit like a hammer. Notice of foreclosure proceedings initiated. Amber gasped, then snatched the paper from him. No, this can't be real. Her eyes darted across the lines, her voice rising higher with each word. They can't take the house, Darren. Not this house, you promised me. I didn't promise this. Darren snapped, his face flushed. He crumpled the letter in his fist, pacing across the front lawn. This is her. This is Mom. She's trying to ruin us. From the neighboring yard, Mrs. Cardenas paused mid-sprinkle with her hose, pretending not to stare but failing. A man walking his dog slowed, eyes flicking curiously toward the shouting. Whispers carried faster than water in this subdivision, and already Darren felt the heat of invisible judgment pressing in from every side. Amber's voice cracked into a shriek. You're the one who signed. You're the one who spent. She jabbed a finger at him, her face streaked with panic. I told you not to buy that damn car. I told you. You loved that car. Darren bellowed back, spittle catching in the Florida humidity. You posted 50 pictures of it like it was the second coming of Christ. Amber hurled the wadded notice at his chest. It bounced uselessly to the driveway, but the impact still landed. Their daughter's bedroom window cracked open upstairs, a curtain shifting. Becca's pale face appeared briefly before vanishing back into the shadows. Gloria, across town, folded laundry with steady hands, unbothered by the storm she had set in motion. The quiet hum of her dryer was a lullaby compared to the chaos she knew was brewing at Darren's house. She didn't need to hear the shouting to imagine it. She'd seen tempers flare before, and she knew when fuel had finally met flame. Howard's voice filled her phone when she picked it up later that afternoon. The filing went through clean. The clerk will set a court date within 30 days. Until then, we sit tight. Gloria nodded, even though he couldn't see. I want it orderly. No surprises, just the facts laid out. That's how you'll win, Howard assured her. After the call, she pulled her estate binder from the cabinet. The leather cover had aged to a rich patina, the corners softened from years of careful handling. She opened to the page listing her heirs. With slow, deliberate strokes of her pen, she drew a line through Darren and Amber's names. Becca's remained untouched, her future clean. Gloria closed the binder, pressing her palm against it for a long, steady breath. Meanwhile, Darren and Amber's fight had spilled into the evening. The sun dipped low, casting orange light across their lawn as neighbors gathered subtle glances behind curtains. Darren slammed the car door, started the engine, then killed it again. Amber stormed inside, her voice carrying through the screen door. We're finished. We're absolutely finished because of you. The humiliation sank deeper than the fear of losing the house. Darren felt it in the way Mr. Allen from 2 doors down gave a stiff, pitying nod, instead of his usual wave. He felt it in the silence of his phone, no one answering his calls for help. That night, as Amber scrolled furiously through online forums about foreclosure loopholes, a new knock rattled the door. She froze. Another letter. This one bore the seal of the HOA. Darren tore it open, his hands shaking. His stomach dropped as he read aloud, voice breaking. Due to delinquent payments, totaling $2,400, the Homeowners Association has filed a lien against your property. Amber's scream ripped through the house. A lien? Darren, do you even know what that means? We can't refinance. We can't. The paper fluttered from his grip, landing on the tile with a crisp slap. Darren stared down at it, hollow. One foreclosure notice wasn't enough. Now their own neighbors had joined the attack. And Gloria, alone in her quiet home, slid her laundry basket aside and picked up a book, her face serene. She already knew what they were just beginning to learn. Collapse doesn't come in one blow. It comes in waves. The letter from the HOA sat on Darren's kitchen counter, coffee rings bleeding into its edges, refinancing restricted. Each line was a locked door he couldn't pry open. By noon, he was on the phone with lenders, pacing furiously across the living room. I've got equity. I've got income. I can make it work, he insisted. But the voices on the other end were uniform, cool, professional, shutting him down with the same script. Missed payments on record. HELOC misuse. Active lien. One banker's polite refusal was the sharpest cut. Mr. Price. At this point, no lender will touch this property. The risk is too high. Darren slammed the phone down so hard it rattled the glass-top table. Across the room, Amber flinched, her arms full of handbags and jewelry boxes. I'm doing what I can, she snapped. She set the items on the counter, the sparkle of sequins and gold dulled under the kitchen light. The pawn shop on Dale Mabry will take these. Maybe a couple grand. Tops, don't look at me like it's not enough. It's not enough, Darren muttered. But he didn't stop her when she swept the bags into a tote and stormed out. While their house drowned in debt, Gloria was signing papers of her own inside Howard's quiet office, the blinds tilted to keep the Tampa sun at bay. The lakefront property she had been watching for months was finally hers. No mortgage, no liens, no strings. She slid the cashier's check across the polished desk with steady hands. Full cash, Howard confirmed, tapping the file closed. You've always been precise, Gloria. I admire that. She only nodded, her thoughts already beyond paperwork. By Friday evening, she and Becca stood on the dock of the new property, the water glittering under the pink wash of sunset. The air smelled of cypress and clean earth, a world apart from the suffocating tension of Darren's house. Becca kicked off her shoes, dipping her toes into the cool ripples. For the first time in weeks, she smiled without forcing it. Can I come here every weekend? She asked. You can, Gloria said simply. She didn't add and more. If needed. That was a promise she would keep in silence until the time came. Meanwhile, Darren's desperation thickened. One evening, he drove to his mother's house, his BMW parked haphazardly at the curb. He knocked lightly, a stark contrast to the pounding fists of days before. When Gloria opened the door, his face was drawn tight, the bravado gone. "Mom," he started, voice low, "I need a loan, just to hold us over until we figure this out." Gloria held the door but didn't step aside. "You already had my help," she said, "and you wasted it." He tried to force a grin, his eyes darting nervously. "Come on, it's me, your son. You don't want to see me lose everything." But she didn't answer. Her silence was the answer. Slowly, she closed the door, leaving him on the porch with his practiced charm collapsing into bitterness. Inside, she returned to her study, where her computer chimed with a new alert from the county clerk's portal. She clicked it open, the glow of the screen reflecting in her glasses. Foreclosure hearing date issued. 21 days. Gloria leaned back in her chair, her hands folded across her lap. Outside, the lake rippled softly in the night breeze, serene, untroubled, everything her son's life no longer was. The courtroom smelled faintly of polish and paper, its ceiling fans stirring stale air across wooden benches. Gloria walked in quietly, her heels clicking with steady rhythm against the tile. She carried nothing but her purse and a folder of neatly organized notes, though Howard had already prepared everything. Her presence was composed, almost serene, in contrast to the storm that trailed in behind her. Darren arrived late, his shirt collar askew, his tie loose as though it were choking him. Amber was at his side, her perfume heavy enough to compete with the room's disinfectant. They didn't whisper, they hissed at each other, their words sharp enough to draw glances from other attendees waiting for their own hearings. When their case was called, Darren rose too quickly, knocking his chair against the wooden bench. He strode to the defendant's table, jaw clenched, eyes darting between his mother and the judge. Amber followed with a tissue in hand, her performance already rehearsed. Howard rose first. Calm, deliberate, he handed over a stack of exhibits. "Your Honor, this is a case of repeated default. The defendant has missed over a year of mortgage payments. Additionally, records show he secured a home equity line of credit without the lien holder's knowledge or authorization. There are also outstanding HOA liens that further restrict refinancing options." The judge, an older man with tired eyes, flipped through the pages slowly. Each turn of paper was another nail hammered in. Darren cleared his throat, his voice straining for authority. "Your Honor, this is being blown out of proportion. We've had some miscommunication. Stress. You know how families are." Amber dabbed her eyes, leaning forward as though confessing. "We've just been going through so much. Darren's hours got cut, and I've been trying to manage the household. Some of the letters must have slipped through the cracks." Gloria sat still, hands folded in her lap, her face calm but unreadable. She didn't need to speak. The documents already told her side. Howard stepped forward again. "With respect, Your Honor, these are not oversights. This is deliberate neglect. Certified notices were ignored. Mail was hidden, and the fraudulent home equity line of credit was used for luxury expenses, remodeling, and a leased BMW. This isn't stress. This is misuse." The judge looked over the rims of his glasses, his voice firm. "Mr. Price, Mrs. Price, these documents leave little room for interpretation. You've defaulted on your obligations and misrepresented your ability to pay. This property is subject to foreclosure and will be placed for public auction." Amber gasped audibly, her tissue pressed dramatically to her mouth. Darren's knees buckled slightly as he sank back into his chair, color draining from his face. His mouth opened but no words came. The sound of the gavel striking the block echoed through the room, final and sharp. Gloria stood as the session ended. She didn't glance at her son or daughter-in-law. Howard gathered the papers, gave her a subtle nod, and together they walked out. In the hallway, Darren slumped into a chair, his hands gripping his hair, shoulders shaking with disbelief. He looked less like the man who boasted about cars and trips, and more like a boy who'd finally been told no. Amber hovered nearby, phone in hand, eyes darting for sympathy, but none came. Outside, the Florida heat pressed heavy. Amber leaned against the concrete wall of the courthouse, sobbing loud enough for passers-by to hear. Yet people skirted around her, eyes averted, not one person stopping to comfort. Gloria, a few paces ahead, tilted her face toward the sun. The air smelled faintly of asphalt and citrus trees in the distance. The decision was done. The house would no longer be theirs. By evening, the twist cut sharper than any courtroom blow. On the county website, the auction notice appeared. Public, unflinching, the price residence listed by address and parcel number. Within hours, the local paper reposted it online. The home Darren had paraded across social media was now splashed across the newsfeed for all of Tampa to see, headed for the auction block. The county auction room was stark and cold, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the faint smell of coffee drifting from a vending machine in the corner. Rows of plastic chairs faced the front, where a clerk shuffled papers with the precision of a metronome. There were only 3 bidders for the price residence. A man in a polo shirt with a notepad full of scribbles, a realtor with sharp nails tapping against her phone, and a third Gloria's proxy. A quiet man in a navy suit, anonymous but well briefed. Gloria herself stayed home, sitting by her window with a cup of coffee, her laptop open to the county's live stream. The clerk's voice was monotone as the auction began. Parcel number 3285, Cypress Landing, opening bid, $220,000. The realtor raised her card first. The man in the polo countered. The numbers climbed but without heat. There was no frenzy, no drama, just a slow, inevitable climb like a tide that couldn't be stopped. When the room grew still, Gloria's proxy lifted his card with a small, final motion. Sold, the clerk announced, gavel tapping once against the block. To Lakeview Holdings, LLC. On Gloria's screen, the name glowed across the bidding ledger. Her name wasn't on the deed. Not directly. The LLC was hers, formed weeks earlier with Howard's help. Quiet, clean, impossible to trace without effort. Darren would never understand that the house hadn't been lost to strangers. It had been reclaimed by the one person he mocked most. By evening, Darren and Amber were served the notice. 30 days to vacate. No negotiations, no extensions. Becca lingered near the doorway when the papers were handed over, her eyes darting to her grandmother's name buried in the fine print. Gloria gave her a subtle nod across the yard, a silent promise that the girl wasn't losing everything. To protect Becca from the worst of it, Gloria arranged the timeline carefully. Movers would be scheduled after school hours. The process would be quiet, without police, without public spectacle. She had no interest in humiliating her granddaughter alongside her parents. At the next HOA meeting, Maya approached her with a rare softness in her usually firm expression. "You did what needed doing," she said quietly. Away from the group, most wouldn't have had the backbone. Gloria only smiled faintly. "I just followed the rules. The same ones everyone else lives by." When the 30 days passed, Gloria walked through the house alone. The air was stale, the rooms echoing without furniture. The smell of dust and faint perfume lingered, a cocktail of neglect and vanity. She ran her hand along the granite countertop Darren had been so proud of, now dulled by fingerprints and crumbs. The wet bar gleamed under the light, another monument to money burned. She moved through each room methodically, checking the corners, opening drawers, ensuring nothing dangerous had been left behind. In Becca's room, she paused. The walls were bare, but a faint outline of posters still clung to the paint. A forgotten bracelet lay in the corner, which Gloria slipped into her pocket, a small piece of the girl's childhood preserved. In the master bedroom, she opened the dresser drawer. There, tucked inside, was the wicker basket from her birthday, its glittery wrapping still intact, its cheap contents untouched. Nail clippers, expired mints, the child's puzzle, all of it left behind. as though it had never mattered to begin with. Gloria stared at it for a long moment, her reflection caught faintly in the mirror above the dresser. The basket sat like an insult frozen in time, but now it was something else too, a relic of the beginning, the spark that had set everything in motion. She closed the drawer gently, but the echo of it followed her out of the room. The rumble of the truck reached Gloria before she saw it, the low growl of gears echoing down the cul-de-sac. She stepped onto her porch, arms folded, the humid Tampa air wrapping her in a sheen of heat. At the end of the driveway, the U-Haul groaned as Darren backed it up, crooked and jerky, scraping the curb. Boxes were stacked haphazardly inside, taped poorly, clothes spilling from gaps. Amber stumbled out of the house in high wedges, dragging a suitcase that lost a wheel halfway down the steps. She cursed under her breath, jerking it toward the truck, as though the world had personally betrayed her. Gloria stood still. She didn't wave, didn't gloat. She simply watched. Neighbors emerged in subtle trickles, Mr. Allen trimming his hedges a little too slowly, Mrs. Cardenas watering plants that didn't need water, kids on bikes circling twice as often as usual. Their eyes all carried the same message, curiosity laced with judgment, and every so often, one of them flicked a glance toward Gloria, nodding slightly as if to say, "We understand." Becca came last. A backpack slung over her shoulders, her arms full of books. She hesitated at the edge of the porch steps. Her eyes shimmered, catching both sunlight and tears. "I don't want to go," she whispered, rushing into Gloria's arms. The hug was fierce, almost desperate, her voice muffled against her grandmother's shoulder. "I want to stay." Gloria smoothed a hand over her granddaughter's hair, steadying her. "You'll spend weekends with me. And more when it's time. This isn't the end. It's just the start of something better." Becca pulled back reluctantly, wiping her face with the sleeve of her hoodie, before Amber barked her name from the driveway. The girl gave one last squeeze before shuffling toward the truck, shoulders slumped under the weight of everything she didn't say aloud. Amber loaded herself in beside Darren, who slammed the door with unnecessary force. As the U-Haul lurched forward, Gloria noticed Amber's phone screen glowing. By evening the posts had already begun, grainy selfies with swollen eyes, captions dripping with self-pity. "Life isn't fair. People betray you. Pray for us." The comments were few, the sympathy thinner than water. Neighbors who once liked every photo now scrolled past without reacting. Family members left curt remarks, "Choices have consequences," before Darren unfriended half of them in a fit of bruised ego. The digital collapse mirrored the real one, friends peeling away, reputations cracking like cheap porcelain. Gloria, meanwhile, kept her focus where it belonged. Within a week, she sat in the school's front office with Becca, filling out transfer paperwork. A guidance counselor smiled kindly, sliding forms across the desk. "We'll make sure she settles in," the woman promised. Gloria also booked Becca's first therapy session at a quiet practice near the lake. No fanfare, no lectures. Just a new schedule, a new rhythm structure to anchor the girl when the rest of her world spun loose. At night in the lake house kitchen they cooked together. Becca chopped vegetables, while Gloria stirred sauces, the scents of garlic and rosemary softening the air. It was the kind of quiet ritual that had weight, small, ordinary yet deeply healing. 2 weeks later, as Gloria sorted through her morning mail, a thick envelope caught her eye. The return address carried the county clerk's seal. She set down her coffee, slit the edge cleanly with a silver opener, and drew out the papers. Her eyes lingered on the bold title, "Deed of Ownership." Below it her name alone. No Darren. No Amber. Just Gloria Price, etched in black ink, permanent. She exhaled slowly, a quiet satisfaction threading through her chest. The house that once mocked her with glitter paper now belonged wholly, irrevocably to her again. The morning light spilled across Gloria's dining table, painting the wood in gold. On it sat the framed deed, edges crisp, her name etched in black letters. She placed it beside her old mortgage license, the two documents forming a quiet shrine to her life's work, 40 years of numbers, rules and discipline, culminating in this victory. She studied them in silence, a thin smile tugging at her lips. These weren't trophies. They were proof. Proof she hadn't been wrong to keep her eyes sharp, her hands steady, when everyone else dismissed her as overcautious. Howard stopped by that afternoon, a leather briefcase in hand, his steps slow but sure. He set the case down and looked at the framed deed with appreciation. "You outplayed them on every front," he said, voice low, carrying the weight of respect rather than surprise. Gloria poured him coffee, the aroma filling the room. "It wasn't a game," she replied. "It was math. They gambled. They lost." Howard chuckled softly, lifting his cup. "And you've won more than property. You've won peace." She didn't disagree. Later that evening, her phone blinked with a new voicemail. Darren's voice spilled through, raw and ragged. "You think this makes you better than me? You'll regret this, Mom. I swear you will." His words cracked under the strain, rage fighting with exhaustion. Gloria listened only once. Then, with a calm press of her finger, she deleted it. No return call. No rebuttal. Silence, she decided, was the sharpest answer. Becca's world, however, began to blossom in that silence. Her laughter returned, small at first, then louder, genuine. She came home from school, with stories of new friends, with crayon drawings tucked into her backpack, with questions about recipes when they cooked together in the kitchen. The air of tension that had once clung to her like a second skin slowly lifted. Gloria noticed it in the way the girl's shoulders no longer hunched when she spoke, in the way she hummed softly while setting the dinner table. One Saturday, as they baked cookies, Becca looked up and said, "It feels safe here." Gloria reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her granddaughter's face. "That's the point, sweetheart. Safety comes first." Beyond her walls, Darren and Amber's lives continued their downward spiral. Amber received a thick packet in the mail, a summons from a credit card company. Her Instagram posts dwindled, the shiny filters giving way to vague captions about being wronged and misunderstood. Few bothered to comment anymore. Darren, once the loudest voice in the room, now muttered quietly as he filled out job applications. He landed an interview at a home improvement store on the edge of town. The irony wasn't lost on Gloria when she heard about it. Her son, who had bragged about luxury, reduced to selling power drills and patio sets. But she didn't laugh. She simply filed it away as another number added to the ledger of consequences. The house by the lake grew brighter with each passing week. Gloria filled her calendar with small routines, morning walks, cooking with Becca, evenings reading by the water. Silence no longer felt like loneliness. It was choice, a freedom earned. Then, one evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. She hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Price," a woman's voice asked. "This is Rachel from the Tampa Herald. We've been following the recent foreclosure case. People are talking. We'd like to profile your story." Gloria's hand stilled on the arm of her chair, her gaze drifting to the framed deed on the wall. The silence she'd crafted so carefully had drawn attention of its own. Gloria almost didn't return the reporter's call. Silence had been her weapon, her shield, but curiosity tugged at her. The woman's voice had been respectful, measured, not hunting for gossip, but for truth. So on a quiet Tuesday morning, Gloria met her at a small cafe by the bay. Rachel, the reporter, kept her notepad tucked away at first. "I want to hear your story," she said, her tone earnest, "and only what you're willing to share. No names, just what it means for someone to take back what's theirs." Gloria stirred her tea slowly, steam curling upward. "It wasn't about anger," she began. "It was about responsibility. When people mock you, they think they've found your weakness. Sometimes they've only pointed out where your strength is waiting." The interview was short. No embellishment. Gloria insisted on anonymity. Her son's name never crossed her lips, nor her daughter-in-law's. She spoke only of the system, of numbers, of accountability. Rachel listened intently, her pen finally scratching toward the end. 2 days later, the headline hit the Tampa Herald, "The Grandmother Who Took Back Her Home." The story spread like fire. First local shares, then regional. Within a week, the article appeared on national forums. Comments flooded beneath it. She's an inspiration. Finally, someone who stood up to entitled kids. Wish I had her backbone. Gloria scrolled through them one evening, the lake breeze drifting through her curtains. Becca leaned over her shoulder, eyes wide. Grandma, you're trending. Gloria chuckled softly. Is that a good thing? Becca wrapped her arms around her grandmother's waist. It means people see you, and they're proud. Just like me. The girl's voice cracked slightly on the last words, but her smile was bright real. Gloria brushed a hand through her hair, tucking the moment into her memory like a keepsake. The emails began soon after. Dozens, then hundreds. Seniors across the country, retired teachers, widows, veterans, wrote to her, their words heavy with desperation. My son took out a loan in my name. The bank won't listen. How did you do it? Gloria read every message. She saved them into folders, printing a few that cut deepest. The weight of their voices was heavier than any basket of cheap trinkets her son had ever given. Howard called late one evening. Gloria, you've tapped into something big. These people aren't just curious. They're desperate. We could build a framework, a nonprofit, a foreclosure defense fund. You'd be the face, the heart. I'd handle the legal backbone. Gloria hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. She had spent decades behind the desk, not in front of headlines, yet the thought of silence now felt less like peace and more like withholding. Maybe, she said at last, her voice slow, deliberate, maybe it's time to turn one victory into many. Howard's laugh was warm through the receiver. That's the Gloria I know. By the end of the week, invitations started arriving. Local podcasts, community groups, advocacy circles. She declined most, not eager for attention. But one stood out, a consulting offer from a nonprofit in Orlando, specifically focused on protecting elderly homeowners from predatory loans. The email sat open on her laptop late into the night. The screen's glow reflected in her glasses, the subject line crisp and insistent, consulting opportunity, we need your expertise. Outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight, calm and vast. Gloria leaned back in her chair, feeling the ripple of change pressing closer. Her silence had started a storm. Now strangers wanted her voice. The clinic's waiting room was cramped and warm, the air heavy with the scent of overbrewed coffee and floor cleaner. Folding chairs lined the walls, each filled by someone clutching a folder of paperwork, faces etched with exhaustion and quiet fear. Gloria adjusted her glasses and stepped inside with a tote bag full of blank forms. She hadn't expected this part of her life, spending Thursday mornings among strangers, lending her eyes and her steadiness to problems that felt too big for anyone else. But the first time she sat at a folding table and walked someone through their mortgage terms, she realized she belonged here. That morning, a woman in her 70s slid a wrinkled stack of letters across the table. They said I missed payments, she whispered, her hands trembling. But I never got half these notices. Gloria read carefully, flipping through envelopes. The lender had quietly shifted due dates, tacking on late fees like leeches. It was predatory, plain and simple. She explained it slowly, guiding the woman through the fine print, circling the key lines that proved she still had ground to stand on. By the end of the hour, the woman was crying, not in despair, but in relief. Later, another woman arrived, barely 30, with a toddler clinging to her arm. They're trying to take my place, she said, voice thin with panic. Gloria scanned her documents, then leaned closer. You have more rights than they're telling you. Don't give them an inch. Together they drafted a response letter that would stall the seizure and force the lender to negotiate. Each time Gloria left the clinic, her tote lighter, she felt a weight of a different kind lifting too. She hadn't chosen this path, but it felt like the natural end of every number she'd ever checked, every lie she'd ever caught. At home, Becca had taken to helping. One Saturday, she sat cross-legged on the living room rug, laptop open, her fingers flying across the keys. Grandma, you need a system. Look. She turned the screen toward her. Rows of neat columns stretched across a spreadsheet, case numbers, contact info, deadlines. Color-coded, tidy, a blueprint of order. Gloria leaned down, her hand on the girl's shoulder. "You're good at this." Becca grinned, her braces catching the light. "I'm good because I learned from you." They cooked dinner afterward, the smell of onions sizzling in olive oil filling the kitchen. Gloria stirred while Becca set the table, humming softly to herself. In those small rituals, the chopping, the stirring, the soft scrape of plates, Gloria felt something stronger than revenge. She felt continuity. A month later, Gloria's face appeared on the glossy cover of Tampa Living magazine, under the bold title, "Women Who Matter." The photo showed her standing by the lake, hair pulled back, gaze steady. She hadn't even wanted the shoot, but Howard had insisted. The magazine hit stands across the city. One afternoon, Amber stopped at a gas station to fill her tank. At the register, the cover stared back at her from a display. Gloria's face, calm, resolute, beamed under the fluorescent lights. Amber froze, her lips tightening. With a sharp motion, she flipped the magazine around, so the blank back cover faced outward, hiding her mother-in-law from view. But hiding the image didn't erase it. Gloria was no longer invisible. That evening, Gloria sat at her desk, scrolling through listings. She paused at one, a modest bungalow, foreclosed, the price cut low. She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. The house wasn't for her. She had no need for it. The next week, the keys landed in the hands of a single mother who had been weeks away from eviction. The woman wept, clutching her child, repeating thank yous into Gloria's hands as if they were rosary beads. Gloria only nodded, her voice quiet. "This is just the beginning." Morning at the lake house carried its own kind of silence, not empty but full. The sun filtered through gauzy curtains, painting the hardwood floors in shifting gold. Gloria woke before Becca, as she always did, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee soon filled the air, its warmth curling into her hands as she sat at the table with her journal. She wrote slowly, pen scratching across the paper. Notes, reflections. The names of the people she had helped this month, the veteran who almost lost his ranch, the widow tricked into a balloon loan, the single mother she'd handed house keys to. Each entry was a marker, not of revenge, but of restoration. Through the doorway, she caught sight of Becca curled up on the couch, still asleep beneath a quilt. A soft snore, a strand of hair across her cheek, peaceful in a way Gloria hadn't seen since before the shouting and slammed doors. That alone made every page of paperwork worth it. Later they baked together, the kitchen alive with the scent of cinnamon and butter. Flour dusted Becca's hoodie as she laughed, cheeks pink from the oven's heat. Gloria let her take the lead on kneading the dough, guiding only with a gentle hand now and then. Small rituals, ordinary but binding. By mid-afternoon they walked down to the dock, the boards warm beneath their bare feet. The lake shimmered silver blue, dragonflies skimming its surface. Becca dangled her legs over the edge, toes grazing the ripples. Gloria sat beside her, her planner resting in her lap, the name she'd written that morning still fresh in her mind. "Grandma." Becca's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Yes, sweetheart." The girl turned, her eyes steady. "I want to grow up like you." Gloria's throat tightened. She reached over, smoothing Becca's hair back. "You already are." As they sat together, Gloria's gaze drifted toward the house, where a small plaque hung above the door. Howard had given it to her after the nonprofit took off, the words etched in clean script, "Own your value." She smiled at the truth of it. Not wealth, not property, not even vindication, but value, claimed and held. The lake breeze lifted, carrying the faint scent of pine and water. Becca leaned against her shoulder, the weight light but grounding. Gloria closed her planner, the ink still drying on today's names, and looked out across the water. "They mocked me with dollar store gifts on my birthday, so I gifted them foreclosure notices."